All right, hello everyone. I apologize. It sounds like we had some technical issues. Um, the joys of Teams. So we are here live. I am speaking to you this week from Tulsa, actually Muskogee, Oklahoma. And I have with me Julio and Juan, Julio is our CTO in our Medellin office, and Juan is one of our workflow developers with both K2 and RPA experience. And they're going to walk you through a solution that we did around labor scheduling for one of our clients and kind of demonstrate the value that workflow can provide in whole scale enterprise applications. So Julio was been with us for now about 6 years, I believe now, Julio, right? And Julio has been has moved up from the data team on into program management. He became my right hand man in our managed services department. Had several hundred people working with him, and has recently been moved up to CTO for the Medellin office. So, Julio, I'm gonna kick it off to you and let you kind of get started, and look forward to seeing it. And Julio, you're on mute.
Thank you, Tommy. Hello, everyone. As I mentioned, my name is Julia Concha. I'm the CTO for Team International. We operate from Colombia. Today, I got with me Juan Barajas, who is our workflow VPN specialist and has also worked with RPA solutions. Um, our our webinar for today is intended to showcase a solution that we implemented for a client or for a healthcare client over here, where they were struggling with labor scheduling problems, especially with the fact of being able to make them on demand and to respond to staff changes. Basically. Um, So, this problem was tackled by our team using K2, now known as Nintex. So that's the tool that we are going to be sharing today. We are going to be doing for starters a short intro of the tool, um, just so you know, and then we are going to be explaining the situation and how we went to solve it. Once again, as mentioned, I got here with me Juan Barajas from our VPN team. And the agenda for today is showing of Nintex. Then we move to explaining a little bit of the challenge of the problem that our client was facing. Then we go straight into the demo. We talk a little bit about how we leverage Nintex capabilities, local capabilities for creation, for visualization creation, and we do a little bit of showcasing of how the process workflow could go. Finally, we do a small Q&A, small Q&A session if there are any questions at the end. Nintex is Nintex K2 is a workflow management, workflow automation solution that leverages a low-code approach, where you can design, and create automations using, as you can see on the right, workflow approach, where there is a series of pre-created packages of components, and you can also add your own components to it. And you use those components basically to drive the information, to drive the process from start to end. The two interesting components that Nintex has is that it has local capabilities that allows you to create web applications in a manner of a few hours. And using the workflow capabilities that Nintex has, we can add business logic, such as an approval processes, preview processes, that kind of logic to the applications. Maybe not an standalone application, but a whole set of interfaces, screens that interact with one another, that interact with users, that can interact with that database, with emails, with external services, towards delivering an end-to-end solution where you go all the way from data input to process or data review and to even a final approval or publishing of the solutions that you're looking for. This kind of integration between systems and processes that Nintex offers will end up in our clients, in our users being able to optimize the usage of their time by removing repetitive or temporary tasks from the equation, right? And allowing simply users to focus on the decision-making process, right? On the decision-making parts of the process, right? While at the same time, once again, using the low-code approach and the workflow approach, all of this comes in the form of reduced implementation effort, right? And a faster return of investment timelines, as we are going to show you for this case that we bring today. As mentioned before, in this case study, we were dealing with a healthcare company that has over 6,000 employees and spread through over 1,000 branches of locations nationwide. For this company, it was a constant challenge to be able to generate the schedule of their employees, their shift rotation, the working schedule of their employees, due to the fact that they were having a hard time dealing, especially with changing circumstances. For example, when a user when an employee was not available, had to have a medical leave or needed a permission, a PTO, or anything like that, they did not have a simple method to be able to adjust the working schedule, and every time that they had to go through the task of creating or adjusting the schedule for a branch, for a location, they were spending between 2 and 6 hours of manual labor on that job, manipulating the Excel file, right? With over 1,000 locations nationwide, this meant that the company was using usually over 2,000 hours of, at the very least, 2,000 man hours to perform this operation on a weekly basis.
So let me understand that, Julio. So let me understand this correctly, Julio. So basically, they had 5,000 to 6,000 employees that they had to do scheduling for long term, and then they also, on a weekly basis and even on a daily basis, they had to, as people got sick or people changed, different occurrences, they had to adjust that schedule or calendar on the fly, and so they were spending roughly 2,000 hours a week to make those adjustments. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, good. And so what we propose is a solution that would dramatically reduce those 2,000 hours. How many hours were we going to reduce?
The process became in our solution. The process became a simple configuration, a parameter input process that takes less than 20 minutes, right? And the creation or the generation of the schedule is a back-end labor, is a labor where the human is not involved, that takes about between 5 and 15 minutes, depending on how many schedules needed to be created. So in the end, it became a 30 to 40 minute process for any given branch when they wanted to do that. So that is reflected in about 60 to 70% reduction in the time that they needed to allocate for this.
So if that's the case, then it sounds like that AI would have played a big part of this, as it would get smarter and smarter over time. Is that correct?
Yes, it would consider like constant changes. For example, if somebody always preferred night shift, then it would consider that within the scheduling process, right? That requires that will be better, as you say, on like with more training, with more executions. But it was part of that to be able to consider those constant parameter changes, so that they didn't want to do it, they didn't need to do it regularly.
Okay, good. Continue on.
Thank you. What was the purpose or the business needs that we were trying to solve with this solution? First, generate and distribute automatically the work shift schedule for all medical staff within the organization, right? For all the 6,000 personnel, either via email or via a web application. Second, and this was a key component and the main focus of the algorithm challenge is ensure that it was an equitable and unbiased distribution of the workload, right? That there were no subjective human factors in the creation of the shift, like somebody, for example, somebody can benefit more from extra hours or night hours than somebody on a regular day. So we removed the human factor from that and simply made sure that everybody was having an equitable workload, and that from an economical standpoint for the operations, we were approaching towards a more cost-effective work schedule. Third, optimize the capacity and usage of the different branches. As you can imagine, each branch has a limited number of spaces, of offices, and locations that with a set of defined specifications. So we also included in our solution, consider those specifications and those limitations for each branch, right? That's part of the configuration that is performed. And finally, provide an efficient way for branch manager to handle staff notice. As mentioned, if somebody gets sick, requires a PTO, remove that person from the schedule and recreate the schedule to adjust appropriately. For this specific project, it took we scheduled this in 6 stages, which you are seeing there, and the final duration of it was 2 months or 8 weeks. Started with 1 week to better detail the requirement specifications. Then in the following 2 weeks, we started working on the permutation algorithm, which is basically the engine of the solution, where we consider all of the possible variables to create a schedule, and the algorithm is in charge of combining all of those variables and all of the preferences that the different employees have towards generating acceptable schedules. Then the next stage is the projections algorithm. What this one does is take the different permutations, the different acceptable schedules that the permutation algorithm takes, and selects which schedule combines better with the schedule for each of the employees in the location, right? So you have a number of acceptable schedules, right? Then you combine the different acceptable schedules and come back with only the ones that are within the set of conditions configured or defined by the branch managers, right? Then once these 2 algorithms were created and were operating properly, the next step was escalation. Escalation corresponds to, okay, we can answer the scheduling question for 1 branch. What do we need to do to answer for 1,000 branches? That's where the escalation of the process came. And finally, on week 7, we started the user evaluation and acceptance testing of the process, right? By week 8, we were publishing the solution, the final version of the solution, and sharing that with the users for the ongoing operation.
So why is that? Because this is a pretty big. I've built scheduling systems back in the late 90s and early 2000s, and even 10 years ago, that were $2 million and 18-month projects in some cases, 6 months short one and 18 months the big one. why are we able to do what took 6 months in 8 weeks now?
Okay, two main factors to that, Tommy. The first one is the fact that, as mentioned before, and Juan is gonna share some of that in the demo. Nintex offers a variety of options and ways to easily and in a really agile manner create front-end interfaces like forms, visualizations, reports. Nintex has that capability, that local capability to speed up the creation of that process, right? That's number one. Number two, as we saw before, is Nintex is heavily focused on a workflow approach, which allows us to create the logic, the backend of the core logic of the application as an execution of a series of processes, instead of having to write huge pieces of code, right? And the final factor is that we leverage in Nintex integration capabilities to be able to connect with different external services, right? For example, for the permutation algorithm, we use Google optimization libraries. Same for the projections algorithm, we use Google optimization libraries as well, which allowed us to, one, parallelize work. We had a total of 2.5 resources working on this. So while one of the resources was working on the front end part of on the forms and visualizations part of the process, another resource was working the algorithm, and another one was working on the integration set. So this allows us basically to use all of those local and integration and workflow tools to speed up the development of this. At no point, like, the amount of code that we had to write was minimal and was only focused on the utilization of the Google algorithm libraries and Google services that we used for the first 5 weeks of work.
Perfect. And just so if I did quick math, that sounds like that was about a 5-person team over 8 weeks, or about 40 weeks, about 1,500 hours to build this, right? And then, so given 40, what you would say, an average of $50 an hour, so you're talking about a $60,000 to $75,000 application now versus a $1 or $2 million application. Is that correct?
Like, not really, because it wasn't a 5-person team. It was at more, like, most times it was 3, sometimes a couple of times it was 2 people. So it was less people than your calculations actually.
So I think we can say, I think we can say it's a $50,000 to $75,000 application versus spending $1 million on this in software development.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, let's move on to the next slide.
So now that basically this is how the process was delivered, now we are gonna hand the presentation over to Juan. Juan is gonna share with you a short demo of the key elements. Once again, form creation process, visualization creation process, and then we are gonna show you briefly how the execution of the whole workflow would go and how the scale is generated. Can go ahead.
Thank you. Hi guys, happy to be here. I will give you a tour in Nintex, and I will explain some concepts that we have in the application. So let me share my screen. So, like Julio said, Nintex is one of the most powerful programs in terms of automation. Within the organization structure, any flow of a process can be managed within the application. All the developments implemented in K2 can function as a web page, a desktop application, or even a mobile application, coordinating tasks, managers, deadlines, and goals, and others. Nintex has separated all common process layers in a BPM, and in turn, each process can be approached from any of it. So a process in Nintex will live where the data, the task, or the interaction with the user exists. So welcome to the designer. Here is where we can create all the application. We can, when we talk about the modeling an Nintex process, you have the designer, which is the part of the application that allows us to build the whole process. If we are talking if we are talking about, for example, the business information, at Nintex we have a smart object. They store all the information to create one we sample choice. One we can create all the information here. So let's create a smart object to storage the information. We only click.
So Juan, have a quick question for you. Sorry for interrupting. So Juan, so smart objects. I'm assuming that there's a lot of smart objects that come in with K2 already, and then you can add your own smart objects as you build new smart objects. You can add them to the library to be reused. Is that correct?
Yes, Tommy. A smart object is a connection between your own database, the Active Directory, everything that you have, a list in SharePoint, or you can establish it all the relation that you have in the company. That is the reason because works with K2 is so easy and interacts easiest in the structure of one company.
Okay, good.
So, for example, if I want to create a table that is the employees, I only click here and I create that one. I assign a new variable and I have all the types of variables that is required in a normal process. And additionally, I only need to change the configuration to one advanced smart object, and this allows me to establish a connection with everything that I want: APIs, REST service, web API directories, all that I want. Once when I create a smart object, I only have to create the views. That is the relation with this information that I have. This allows me to enter new information or for request some particular info. So for create a view, I only have to click here and generate the views. A view, for example, let's create one. This tells me if it's a list view, that is a list in which I can enter information, or at least with a request with all the record that I have stored here. K2 automatically create me the entire window with all the info and all the files that I have there. And when I finish, I just save, I finish, and the process is ready to work. I can run time like a URL, and it's totally functionally. I can add templates to adapt that window to my own web page, for example. And this is the one. Go ahead, Julio.
Yeah, thank you, Juan. Here is what's worth mentioning that, of course, I mean, this is a simple example for you guys to better have a better feeling how Nintex and the Nintex tools allows you to create web interfaces and small applications or components in a matter of minutes, hours. But you can, of course, customize the presentation, add colors, add logos, add like a add more specific look and feel to the different components, right? But as you saw, and this is in part to answer like a prior question to Tommy, as you saw, usually this kind of application or this kind of interface would take at least a couple, 2-3 days, at least to create such a version using a standard or a usual development approach. You have to create the front end, you have to create the back end to save the information, to manage the data, all of that, right? All of this can be done way more efficiently using the pre-created, the preset components that Juan is sharing with Nintex. Instead of thinking about days, weeks, you can start thinking about hours.
Yes. Okay, finally, we have the workflows. What is the representation of an entire flow in a company for one particular process, and where we can follow the execution of different activities that we model in our business. Sorry. So you only do the same, create a new workflow, and a window like that appears. So here we can create everything that we want. The trigger for the particular workflow, the task reviewers, the owners of some particular task, how the entire activities is going to be executed in a process for a different company. You can add everything that you want, mails, relation codes to the one API, storage one records, everything that you want when you want to structure a process.
So let me just jump in there, Juan. So I think what we're trying to do, I want to make sure I set the expectations with the users and that are watching this. I think the idea behind this is to kind of show you just the very simple nature in which you can quickly put together things to build an application. And we're building towards actually showing you the solution that we built using these components, the simplicity of these components to build a very complex system. So I just wanted to kind of set that expectation before we go too much further. So, all right, continuing on, Juan.
Thank you so much. Now I want to show you a showcase that Julio mentioned before. So let's see how this works. So like I mentioned before, we have here the designer. I can launch the application directly from the designer, or I can go to the URL that Nintex built for us. So I create a homepage and I only have to launch this in my browser. Now, to understand this process, it usually is used to automatically calculate the shift chart of people who work in an office, and where it must be guaranteed that all people are assigned the same number of working hours, the same number of night hours, and the same number of breaks, you name it. This process is useful, for example, in hospitals, contact centers, office with 24-hour shift, everything like that. So here I can see my headquarters, my hospital that I have available. We use some names that hospital in USA. And if I want to add some condition for a particular hospital, I just create a new one. I add the correct information to register one particular hospital, the business hours and the shifts that I have available. For example, I have morning shifts, in I don't know, 6 a.m. to the 2 p.m. and you name it, night turns, night shifts, or the entire shift. You can construct everything that you want, and the office or the consulting rooms that you have available to one particular event, or the service or specialization from one particular doctor, and the numbers of your employees, so you can charge here some particular medic that you have, and when you create one particular hospital, you submit this form, and Nintex sent a request to the API. The API takes the information that I sent and build a shift chart for a period of time. We have, for example, a week, 1 month, a daily shift, or annual calendar, and everything that you need. Additionally, you can establish rules for the medics, for the doctors, like Julio said. For example, one surgery only can attend people on Fridays, or Monday or Fridays, everything that you need. And once you have this created, you only have to see the results in the home page. So here you're going to find the information about this particular hospital with all the people and all the schedule that you created, and at the end you can see a table with all the shifts that you have for this week or for the second week. This is the entire fortnight, and this is the shift, the number of hours, the number of tours that they have.
As thanks, let me complement here. One, as you can see, I mean, for the purposes of the webinar, and given the limited time that we have, we don't want to spend 15 minutes looking at the screen. We reduced the number of employees that this scenario has to 4 or 5 employees, to make sure that it can be executed faster. So it takes only a few seconds to execute. But as mentioned before, this solution can be thoroughly scaled to again support up to, we tested it for up to 200 employees for some of the scenarios that we had with the client, right? 200 employees per facility. And it can be scaled up all the way to, once again, 6,000 employees nationwide, which is the final goal of the solution implemented for this scenario.
So if I heard that correct, Julio, what you're saying is we created kind of a special demo environment for this presentation, but if somebody wanted to actually see the full application that we built for the 6,000 people and see how it would work across multiple sites and larger sites, we can demonstrate that as well too, right?
Yeah, we can scale up this environment where we are to support that number of users. It will mainly be a matter of scaling the resources available for the algorithms to run. That's basically it.
Yep. Okay, good.
Just
so I would say if anybody's interested in seeing the full application across 6,000, multiple hundreds of locations, 6,000 employees, we can demonstrate that full one, but it does take it's a little bit, that's probably a 2-hour demo in and of itself.
Yeah, as I mentioned before, the whole processing of all of those facilities is about 15 minutes of looking at the screen drawing. So that's what we wanted to. We didn't want to have that in this webinar. That's why we scaled it down.
Okay, good. Juan, continue.
No, just to finish, I just want to demonstrate that we can provide every report that you want to show, and you can, for example, use a particular theme that you have in your web page. You only have to share that, and this is going to change according to your desires. Or for example, if you want to expose your entire process through SharePoint, we only have to select that option. This is all
So if
for
we wanted
me.
to do the output, if we wanted to do the output in Power BI or Tableau or any of the number of analytic tools that would, or reporting tools, this is easily reported out and create the dashboards and views that we want. Is that correct?
Is totally correct. It is transparent for all of the environments that you have in your company.
Perfect. All right, good. And so I think that's it. Julio, I got a question for you. Hopefully the audience has some questions too. Let's move to Q&A in this. So we talked about, I built scheduling applications in the past that, were easily 10,000 hours worth of man hours, right? And we talked about this being maybe 1,200 to 1,500 hours. So my question to you is that typical of low code, no code options? Are you saving, 10 to 15%, or I guess it would be 85 to 90% you'd be saving? Is low code, no code 10 to 15% usually of the cost of a full blown enterprise application? And if so, why wouldn't I use that all the time, right? When would I guess a follow-up question to that would be, when would I think about low code, no code, and when would I think about, traditional enterprise development?
Well, Tommy, there is one caveat that you have to consider here, and it's the fact that Nintex is not only or not primarily a low code application or platform, right? It has strong and extensive low code capabilities, but it's primarily a business process workflow automation and management solution, right? As such,
2-in-1.
that
Yep.
yeah, as such, that bridge between enterprise applications and low-code applications is shortened by the fact that that we are capable of easily creating complex workflows and adding business rules into those workflows, right? So it gets much shorter in this case than a scenario where you have to choose between an enterprise application and an Nintex or K2 deployment, because you can use this on an enterprise level. As I mentioned before, we can easily support 5,000 users. We can manage those users. We can connect to the Active Directory of companies, right? And we can scale up the solution to support any number of workflows that any client has, right? And even create custom permissions. Like, for example, some users accessing one or two application sets, other user accessing different sets of applications, and all of that. So it's different. I mean, the conversation here is different in the sense that at this point, I would only recommend for anything that we can view as a workflow, as a process. I would say that Nintex can have a strong case for implementing that in a way more cost-effective way than an enterprise development effort would be able to.
No, that's good. I guess my follow-up question to that then is this: what are the attributes in which you would look at? You talked about workflow being an attribute. Is there other attributes when you look at something you go, yeah, that might be a good candidate versus, maybe we need to do tradition? And then I have a follow-up question to that as well too. Other than workflow, are there other attributes you look for?
The attributes. Okay. So, I mean, from an enterprise standpoint, right now, my thought process when I say, okay, is this a regular development project, or is this something that can be created with a VPN local platform, is mainly like the scalability and reusability of the application. Like, for example, if I'm catering to external users, right, to users outside my organization that are not my employees, most likely an enterprise development is going to be the way to go, because it allows you better control into who you expose your solution to. Even though there are some licensing options that Nintex has, there is going to be some limitations in regards to the final audience of that solution. But once again, from an scalability standpoint, from a usability standpoint, when I put something like a solution like Nintex VPN/local face to face with a solution with a custom development, is usually gonna be a winning scenario, a winning case for the locals in terms of return of investment.
Good. And so there's Nintex. I'm just thinking through this. There's Nintex. There's Power Apps. You know, the advent of Power Apps, which are taken off, and I know you're a big proponent of. You know, we talk about Teams as a productivity suite, and being able to launch either Power Apps or workflows or RPAs straight from your team and have it interact both with Teams and Power BI on the back end from a reporting standpoint. So, for architects that are out there, they're kind of looking at all these solutions that they have, when would you look at something like a Power Apps versus a Nintex or a K2 or, and what are some of the things that would give an advantage you would say, okay, this project probably fits better into Power Apps, and this one fits better into a Nintex K2 type solution. Can you just talk about how they integrate into each other and then kind of how they differ from each other?
I would say there are two key factors that can be kind of under consideration when you are thinking or sizing the right solution, right? The first one is the fact that Nintex can be deployed either in the cloud or on-premise. So if you, for example, if you have on-premise assets, servers, and infrastructure that you can leverage for this, is going to be a cheaper option than fully going into the cloud, right? On the other hand, Power Apps and the Power Platform as a whole is cloud-based, is Azure cloud-based. So you are gonna need a footprint in that cloud to be able to support. The second item is in terms of integrations, but this is quite specific. I mean, Power Platform, as you can imagine, being a Microsoft product, it has way more integrations and native integrations with all of the Microsoft platform, that being things like Dynamics, like SharePoint, SQL Server databases, and so on, right? While integrations to external systems, even though they are available, can be a little bit more challenging. So if a company tends to go with a heavily Microsoft heavy shop, then Microsoft Power Platform is gonna have an edge over any other solution. On the other side, if you have things like legacy applications or applications created or that leverage other technology stack like Java, for example, Oracle, and so on, even though, once again, Power Platform also offers integrations to that, it becomes a more even field for a product, for a platform like Nintex, right? Why? Because Nintex is this agnostic to these big providers. They talk with everyone. They integrate with everyone, right? So if you wanna, if your case is, for example, and this happens a lot, the companies, if you have a system based on Oracle, another system based on Microsoft, and, for example, another custom legacy system that uses an old version of ASP or something like that, then you are gonna want to have an application or a platform that has some native integrations already, but also allows you to create some and reuse custom integrations. So at that kind of level, Nintex versus Power Platform becomes a more even conversation, and there you need to go further into detail into the benefits of each.
So if I were to paraphrase, small apps, quick apps, Power BI, Power Apps. If you're looking at more enterprise, you're probably in workflow. You're looking at more of a Nintex. You're looking at integrating multiple systems, more Nintex. We're looking at Microsoft and staying within that platform. Then Power BI may offer a little bit of deal. Is that a fair assumption? Is that a fair summary?
Yeah, it's a first summary. If you are a Microsoft shop, Power Platform, you're gonna have a strong case.
Would you please continue sharing the presentation? Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks, Ted. So, all right, and I have two other questions. One for you, Julio. One for you. One. It sounded like you were about to add something. What would you like to add?
Yes, I want to speak about the difference between these particular platforms, because I think is the main point here. We in technology are coming from an idea that each process required a person working on it, and we have this like hereditary problem. So at essential, each process in a company have to be building over a BPM structure that is totally automatically. But because we receive a lot of development that required people, somebody attending the process, we have to use RPA or complement with Power Apps and this particular application that works in this scenario. So if a company have the chance to becoming or use their entire structure in a BPM like Nintex, that can be great. That can be save a lot of money, a lot of time, and this is really useful for one particular business.
Okay, good. All right. So workflow. Now, as we talked about, workflow applications being great for Nintex K2. How does my question is this? We've been doing a lot of webinars on RPA lately, right? So when do we use RPA versus we use a workflow tool? Can they be used together? And just kind of generally talk about that whole ecosystem around the buzz that you hear about RPA, and then and then the terms we use like BPM. Can you just kind of go into a little bit more detail about when to use each?
Of course. So BPM, I recommend you use BPM when you have a new process that you want to automate this at started. And RPA is, I recommend RPA when you have application that the cost of move this entire process to a new one is too much. So you can use RPA to automatically take decision over this application. That is, like I said before, a heresy that you have to use. You don't have any option. So you can automatically automatic this process using RPA. But if you have the chance, you must use BPM to becoming your entire company in a model of saving resources and attending all the process quickly and be efficient with the requests and everything like that. RPA continue to be a top one in technology, a top one in solutions that works perfectly if you have that particular applications that you cannot move. You have to conserve that one for I don't know, a biggest period of time, and you need a quickly solution.
So if I were going to paraphrase that, so BPM BPM is kind of you want to automate processes using BPM, but you kind of want to do the tasks. Once the process has been created, you want to do tasks within RPA. So if that's the case, you may have step one of a BPM may use one or two bots to perform tasks that once that it gets completed, can then then the BPM would actually move to phase two, and maybe you do another bot, then move to phase three, maybe use another bot to do different types of tasks on that. So RPA is more the performance of the task. BPM is the underlying workflow with forms and it is the automation vehicle which provides the most stability. Is that a fair assessment?
Yes, this is a good example. For example, if you have a web page that you use to request for some particular information for your company, you have to use RPA because you cannot change the web page. But if you are the owner of the web page and you are attending that request, it's better if you use BPM because you're going to attend that particular request, follow the entire flow of the process, assigning the responsible ones, the approvers. So in this case, it's useful use BPM.
Good. Ted, do we have any questions from the audience? I think I took up too much of the time asking questions myself, but we have questions from the audience?
No, Tommy, we don't.
Okay. Well, it looks like we got 3 more minutes, so I guess I'll let, is there any last comments from Juan and Julio, and then I'll do the wrap up.
Well, I'd just like to promote our upcoming webinar. We are gonna be doing a more, as you saw today, we have a pretty straightforward process where it's mainly form generation and data input and then processing of that data. In our coming webinar, we are going to be using some more complex components and services such as machine learning and OCR to enhance this kind of automation. So look forward to that.
All right. Well, listen, I hope everybody got out of this that, you can create some very complex enterprise applications using low code, no code workflow tools. K2 happens to be our favorite. We leverage it quite often because it is low code, no code. It does have forms, it does have the workflow, and so it has all the components that most people need to build most enterprise applications. To Julio's point, you can then take that information, and depending on how much information you have, you can put it in a database, you can put it in a data mart, you can start spinning reports off of it, you can display the information, you can put AI on top of it, but the underlying application that gathers that information that you want to do analytics or AI on, it can be done very quickly using these types of low code, no code workflows. To the usually at a tenth, somewhere between 10 to 15%. I'll say I feel very confident, less than 20% of the time that it takes to build an enterprise application. So it can be a very, it's great for speed to market, it's great for prototypes, and certainly it's great for ROI. So hopefully that's what we displayed today. The application we did was a modified version, a slimmed down version, if you will, of the full application that we did in over 8 weeks. We did in 8 weeks what used to take 6 months. So 6 months a year. And so if you would like to see the full application, we'll be glad to show it to you. Just contact us, but that's probably going to be an hour and a half or 2-hour demo. So I do appreciate it. I hope everybody's has a great day. Thank you, Julio. Thank you, Juan. And thank you, Ted. And we look forward to seeing you next week. Have a great day.